What happens when a seasoned journalist decides he's had enough of royal excuses and confronts a prince live on national television? You're about to witness one of the most ruthless takedowns in morning show history, as George Stephanopoulos methodically dismantles Prince Harry's credibility in front of millions of viewers. This wasn't a friendly sit-down, and it wasn't a carefully managed publicity stop. This was real journalism colliding head-on with a carefully curated royal narrative. The studio lights burned intensely as Prince Harry settled into the familiar chair on the Good Morning America set. His posture was relaxed, his expression confident, the kind of calm that comes from years of controlled media appearances. To Harry, this was supposed to be routine, another chance to promote his charitable work, soften his public image, and remind audiences of his role as a global advocate. George Stephanopoulos greeted him warmly, professional as always. But longtime viewers could sense something different immediately. There was an unmistakable sharpness in his eyes, a focus that suggested this interview would not follow the usual script. After the standard pleasantries, Stephanopoulos acknowledged Harry's foundation and the causes he supported. Then, without raising his voice or changing his tone, he introduced the question that would change everything. He referenced Harry's repeated calls for privacy, his public frustration with media intrusion, and then calmly pointed out the obvious contradiction. Here Harry was again, on national television, discussing deeply personal aspects of his life. How, Stephanopoulos asked, does one demand privacy while continually choosing the most public platforms available? The question landed harder than expected. Harry offered a familiar response, explaining the difference between choosing to tell his story and having it stolen and distorted by tabloids. It was an answer he had given before, polished and rehearsed. But Stephanopoulos didn't move on. He leaned forward slightly and reframed the issue from the audience's perspective. To many viewers, he said, it looked like privacy mattered only when it was inconvenient, and publicity was embraced when it served personal goals, book sales, or image repair. The studio fell into an uncomfortable silence. Harry adjusted in his seat, his smile tightening as the realization set in. This was not a supportive interview. This was a challenge. As the conversation deepened, Stephanopoulos shifted from contradiction to consequence. He reminded Harry of the gravity of his past statements, particularly the allegations involving racism, emotional neglect, and abandonment by the royal family. These were not abstract claims, Stephanopoulos noted. They were accusations that reverberated across the world, damaged reputations, and permanently altered public perception of an ancient institution. Yet, despite their seriousness, the details had always remained frustratingly vague. Names were never given. Timelines were blurred. Context was withheld. Stephanopoulos asked the question many had been thinking but few dared to ask directly. When making accusations this severe, doesn't the public deserve clarity? Harry's demeanor changed. He described the matters as deeply personal family issues, complicated by centuries of tradition and institutional behavior. Stephanopoulos immediately countered that once Harry chose to discuss those issues publicly, they stopped being purely private. He then addressed a deeper contradiction, one that visibly unsettled the prince. Harry had built a lucrative career, criticizing the very institution that gave him his title, platform, and privilege. Millions of dollars had been earned telling stories about royal suffering while still benefiting from royal identity. How, Stephanopoulos asked calmly, was that not hypocritical? The tension in the studio intensified. Camera shots tightened, producers sensing history unfolding. Harry pushed back, insisting he never sought profit from controversy, only truth. That word again. Stephanopoulos seized it, dissecting the idea of my truth. He questioned whether truth could really be personal when accusations involve factual claims. Truth, he argued, is not a feeling. Something either happened or it didn't. Calling something my truth sounded less like honesty and more like insulation from accountability. Harry's frustration became visible. His responses grew sharper, more emotional, while Stephanopoulos remained steady and controlled. The contrast was striking. For the first time, Harry appeared unprepared, facing questions he could not redirect or deflect. The interview took a decisive turn when Stephanopoulos introduced transcripts from Harry's own previous interviews, reading Harry's words aloud. He referenced the now infamous statement about concerns over how dark Harry's child's skin might be. Stephanopoulos asked directly whether Harry stood by that claim. Harry confirmed the conversation had occurred, but insisted context was missing. Stephanopoulos didn't let him escape. If context mattered so much, he asked, why not provide it now? Who said it? When did it happen? What exactly was said? Harry refused, again invoking privacy. Stephanopoulos dismantled that defense immediately. Privacy, he said, cannot be selectively applied. Harry had already made the conversation public. At that point, withholding details only served to protect himself while leaving others defenseless. The audience was completely silent. This was no longer an interview. It was a cross-examination. Harry accused Stephanopoulos of twisting his words. Calmly, Stephanopoulos replied that he was doing the opposite. He was quoting Harry directly. The imbalance grew more obvious with every exchange. Then came the financial claims. Stephanopoulos revisited Harry's assertion that he had been cut off and left financially stranded. He contrasted that narrative with documented facts. Millions inherited from Princess Diana and continued financial support from his father. He asked how someone with that level of security could describe himself as abandoned. Harry insisted the fear felt real at the time. Stephanopoulos clarified that he wasn't calling Harry a liar. He was questioning whether emotional framing had replaced factual accuracy. That distinction cut deeply. Harry snapped defensively, his composure visibly cracking. When he attempted to pivot back to discussing mental health and charitable work, Stephanopoulos refused to move on. Credibility, he said, is the foundation of trust. Without it, even worthy causes suffer. In the final stretch, the interview reached a level rarely seen on morning television. Stephanopoulos addressed memory, perception, and emotional bias. He explained that people often remember events in ways that support the narratives they've built about themselves. He asked whether it was possible that Harry's perspective had been shaped by pain, resentment, or a need to see himself as a victim. The question stunned Harry into silence. When he finally spoke, he called it cruel. Stephanopoulos responded that truth often is. He connected the discussion back to mental health and social justice, arguing that both demand honesty, restraint, and accountability. Then came the final question, delivered calmly, almost gently. After all the contradictions, the vague accusations, and the selective use of privacy, why should the public trust Prince Harry? Why should they support his causes, buy his products, or believe his version of events? Harry had no answer. Seconds passed in uncomfortable silence. Finally, he muttered that people could judge for themselves. Stephanopoulos agreed, adding that after this conversation, they finally could. The interview ended without applause, without closure, just stunned quiet. Harry sat motionless, years of carefully managed public relations unraveling in real time. What was meant to be a promotional appearance became a defining moment, a reminder that when narrative meets accountability, even royalty is not immune.